Good morning, everyone. We'd like to thank you for joining us today as part of our inaugural Tigunia Virtual Forum. We greatly appreciate everyone who has joined us for this presentation, and we hope the information shared during this presentation is beneficial to you and your team after you leave here today. My name is Kelly Porter, one of the sales team members here at Tigunia, and I'll be your moderator for this presentation. It will be for approximately 45 minutes with a 15-minute Q&A at the end. We do encourage that you ask questions, as this is ultimately about providing you with as much information as possible. All questions are to be asked in the Q&A chat, which you can find on the right side of your screen, and we will review and answer each question at the end if they were not already answered during the presentation. Now, without further delay, I introduce to you now our VP of Business Intelligence here at Tigunia, Ryan Patterson.
Thanks, Kelly. And thanks everybody for joining us this morning. I appreciate everybody's time. I know I know you're all busy folks, and your time is important. So I appreciate you spending it with me. Today's first session is going to be on how can I run reports. I have the privilege of kicking off day 3 of the Tigunia Virtual Forum here. If you haven't already caught some of those sessions over the last 2 days, be sure to catch the recordings that we'll be making available for you. There's just a wealth of information out there that's very helpful for people of all trades. So definitely check that out. There was a session yesterday on the Power BI data gateway that Kenya, my colleague, performed, and I'll be referring to that through part of this as well. So if you need more information, definitely check that recording out. And for those of you that are staying on through the rest of the day, I'll be talking with you in the next session as well, when we go into kind of a look at Jet Analytics powered by Time Extender and how we can leverage that in your environment. So this session here is titled "I'm Offsite. How can I run reports?" Right, and the idea is with the current day and age, everybody's working from home. Not everybody, but a lot of people, especially in the reporting realm, are working remotely. And as such, we've seen a lot of things come up where people are either unsure about how to run reports remotely, didn't know that that's even a thing that's possible, and basically we just wanted to showcase a couple of really neat and flexible tools that are available to you that you can use to do just that, to start running those reports remotely, whether that's from home or from your phone or from the coffee shop down the street, right? So Kelly, introduced myself. I am Ryan Patterson. I'm the director or the VP of Business Intelligence here at Tigunia. I've been working with database and SQL reporting since right around 2000, 2003, somewhere in there. And so I'd like to say it's been about 2 decades of this. I've seen a lot of different front ends. There's a whole wealth of tools out there now, and they're all very neat looking. There's lots of neat graphics, right? And that's usually what catches your attention. But graphics aren't always what we need. We often need data. We need reports for a reason, not just to see something pretty. And so that's where, we need to make sure that the reports are sensible. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So today's session, we're going to be looking at 3 different options for how you can run these reports remotely. Okay. On screen, you can see those icons. We got Power BI, Jet Reports, and SSRS. If you haven't seen any of these in action, well, today's your day. Get to kind of see how easy we can manipulate some of this data and go from report creation all the way up through seeing it in the web, right? So each of them comes with their own, kind of pros and cons, if you will. As you can see, they're all externally accessible, hence why they're inside of this session, right? I need to run reports remotely. So we can get to all of these externally if necessary. Jet Reports and SSRS actually offers kind of an intranet option as well. So if you wanted to maybe expose it over a website, but make sure that people are connected to your VPN or on your site, actually on site, then you can kind of enforce it through an internally accessible link. They all connect to SQL databases. That's pretty much a given at this day and age. But on top of that, they also have some additional data source connections. Right, they'll all connect to ODBC. SSRS, that's pretty much its limitation, right? SQL and ODBC connectors, and now anything that you could kind of pipe into a SQL database. You can connect to through SSRS, but it does have that kind of a limitation there. Jet Reports, a very powerful tool built directly inside of Excel. We can connect this to SQL databases, ODBC databases, web services, right? It's primarily built off of the Dynamics stack, but it can be used against any kind of data source and is built directly in Excel. We'll take a look at that today too. And then last but definitely not least, Power BI. It's kind of the biggest buzzword in the reporting world right now, and as such, it's earned its clout. They have constantly been putting out new updates for it. Listening to the forum and the group of people that are actually using it and taking those suggestions and building them into the product. And the return of that has made it a very sound product that you can build a lot of different reports in. Its kind of drawback is that it's primarily for dashboards, right? If I wanted to see a trial balance or an income statement in Power BI, I'd be a little bit amiss. So those are the three that we're going to be taking a look at: Power BI, Jet Reports, and SSRS. They each have their place. And I've worked with many clients that use all three of them, and sometimes even additional front-end tools as well, right? There's, like I mentioned, there's a lot of front-end tools out there. A lot of them do offer ways to connect remotely, but given the 45-minute time gap here, this is the three that we're going to be talking about. If you have questions about any others, the Lookers, the Tableaus, the Grafana's, I mean, any of those out there, feel free to reach out. Our team is versed in, like I mentioned, almost all of them. There's only a few that I've only heard about. Most of them we've actually worked with, so happy to help in any capacity. So with that, let's go ahead and start off with the kind of the most user-friendly of the batch, Power BI. All right. And I start off with I call it the most user-friendly because it's kind of got one of the most the softest entry points for licensing, and it's also got a very quick return for users on I don't know what I'm doing to hey, look, this is pretty. Obviously, not always. We don't always want a pretty report, but that's kind of what grabs attentions. So Power BI, that's one of its biggest kind of namesakes, I guess, is that it's a visually attractive reporting solution. It's very easy to use, and you can customize all of your dashboards, obviously. But one of the other kind of like claim to fame is the attention that the Power BI team, or the Microsoft team, I guess you could say, has put towards the amount of connectors that they're building into Power BI. And we'll take a look at that here in a second. But the list is ever growing. And that's a huge win because not all front-end solutions can say that. Whereas Power BI, it's like, oh, I found a new data source. Let's try it. So very, very handy there. I mentioned that it's cheap to buy. Power BI is $10 per user per month, right? It's as you scale up, like if you had 200 users that you needed to share reports with, well, it gets up to about 2,000 a month, right? Does reach a point where it can be not cheap necessarily, but $10 per user per month is a cheap entry point. You could have your IT team spin it up, test it out, build some reports, and if everything checked out and everyone liked it, then you could weigh the cost, right? It's one of the last ones there. The last bullet of the pro is also kind of the first bullet on the con, right? It's cloud-based access, but it's cloud-only access, right? And the reason I put that there is because if we're talking how can I run reports remotely, Power BI has to be in the conversation because that is the way that the reports are consumed. Once we've built the report, we publish it to the Power BI service, which is ultimately just app.powerbi.com, right? It's Microsoft's website out there in the cloud. So some people have issues with that because that means that their data is somewhat accessible from the cloud, right? Now, in days past, that meant you had to import all of your sensitive data up into the cloud. That's not the case anymore. We can use the on-premises data gateway to kind of secure our data and use Windows authentication still. So It's not as much of a security risk, but it does present itself as a con to some because it does require that your users have web access, right? You can't just prevent them from getting to outside websites. Another con there, freedom can have its problems, right? When you say something is super easy to use, then it's inevitably going to find problems with it, right? You can't make everything easy. And then I guess the last one is that the paginated reports require a premium license. And if you don't know what I mean by that, that's okay. A paginated report, as opposed to a dashboard where we have charts and graphs and everything, a paginated report is basically details, right? If I wanted to print off all my sales lines, or if I wanted to print off an income statement, right? Those would kind of lean themselves more to a paginated report. It does require a premium license, which steps up from the $10 per user per month to I'm not sure exactly where the premium licensing is, but the premium licensing is corporate wide. So you buy it once, you have as many viewers as you want, and everybody can have, they're all Power BI Pro licenses effectively, but then you can open up paginated reports. We'll actually be looking at what a paginated report kind of looks like towards the end of this as we get into SSRS, because they both are built by Microsoft, and guess what? It's about the same thing. SSRS has effectively been kind of redesigned into Power BI paginated and is a very powerful tool. So like I mentioned, with Power BI, it used to be we had to import everything up to the cloud. Kind of left some people kind of leery about their data just sitting up in the website. And so Microsoft reacted to that in kind and made what's known as the on-premises data gateway, right? Not the on-premise, the on-premises data gateway. If you don't know the difference between those two, definitely check James's session that started off the Tigunia virtual forum. But a premise is effectively an idea or a concept. A premises is a location. Right. What we're saying is this is a data gateway that is on premises. It's on one of your machines inside of your domain. This gateway is a simple, small little application. It runs as a user account, right, with your Windows authentication internally. And it effectively gives you a point of access from the cloud into your local domain. The data gateway doesn't necessarily have to be on the exact same server as some of your other data points, but you want to be as close to your data as possible. For more information on that, definitely check Kenya's session yesterday. He goes into full details on setting this all up and the what you need to know. One of the neat things about the on-premises data gateway is that it can be used by multiple Power Apps. So yeah, we're going to be using it for Power BI, but if you haven't heard of like Power Automate or Power Flow or any of the Power Apps, definitely look into those. We have some sessions by Ron yesterday that went into those as well, and they're just very powerful. Power Automate, I think, is my favorite of the batch, in which I can tell it to, I'm not a software programmer, but I can create a case statement that says, after this, do this and do that, and then move this file over here and then save it like this, right? And that's the kind of stuff we can do with Power Automate, and it can use this same on-premises data gateway, right? It's kind of like having a security guard at your front door. It notices the Power App and lets it through. So with the on-premises data gateway, we can actually just publish a report up to the cloud and have our users consume it as if it was live, right? We no longer have to import that data. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into Power BI real quick. And I'm actually just going to create a quick little report. We're going to publish it up to the web, and then we're going to take a quick peek at it, and we'll move into our Jet Reports discussion. Obviously, with the 45-minute time gap here, or time window, I'm not going to be building very huge reports. But I did want to showcase how easy it is to, from concept to creation on what you can do here. So I'm just going to say get data. And I mentioned earlier that one of the neat pros about Power BI is the near unlimited data sources that you can connect to. And this is that preview for you, right? We can connect to any kind of flat files. We can connect to all of the main SQL databases. But beyond that, we can hook up to things that are new, right? Redshift, Snowflake, Azure Synapse, any Azure Data Lakes or Azure SQL databases, right? Business Central in the cloud, D365 out in the cloud, right? And so Power BI has really made the effort to make it so that these data sources are available to everyone. And not only that, but you can notice one of these was a Power BI data sets. So if I went through the effort and I've made this, the end all be all data set for this report that has everything about sales, I can just make that a sales data set that can be reused by multiple reports. So there's a lot of flexibility here. Anyway, with that being said, I'm going to just use some analysis services databases. If you're not familiar with analysis services or with the term cube, that's what we're going to be using here. And for this, I'm actually using some cubes that were created using Jet Analytics. If you've never seen that, please reach out. Let me show you. I think you'll fall in love. So with that being said, I'm just saying, go to this server. It found my database. I'm going to find my sales cube. We're going to say OK. And from there, it's just as easy as kind of clicking my visualizations from the second to the right pane, and then telling it what I want to see in the report, right? So as always, got to have a pie chart inside of a dashboard, right? The obligatory, that's not even a word. Anyway, the required pie chart within any report. So we'll just say sales, and I want to see this by my location, for instance, right? And all I've really done is I've just checked 2 boxes, I guess 3 if we count the pie chart. So 3 different boxes, and I've already got my visualization in here. And I can go through and do a whole lot of other stuff, like maybe I don't want to show the background. Let's keep a border on there, and I can move my legend to be, maybe bottom center instead of over there, right? Well, that doesn't quite work out, so we'll keep it over there, right? There's lots of different things that we can change in each of these, but for the purposes of this, I'm just going to kind of create a quick little report. So now let's say quantity by salesperson. Let's put that up here. And then lastly, let's put in a, let's say profit by day. Now, obviously, with different reporting needs and your actual company needs, you might need to put some more thought into me, just, rather than just clicking through it. But the premise is about the same, right? Once we've kind of created the data set, in this case, I've created some cubes to be used for this, Power BI is very, very flexible, right? Now, you can also use Power BI against standard SQL databases, and you can actually create your whole data model inside of Power BI. I didn't for this, simply for the sake of kind of creating a fast report, but it is possible. And then lastly, let's just, I'm going to add a slicer here, and I'm going to have this on company, and I'm going to just make this the horizontal. There we go. And let's make it so that it's not the unknown company. Cool. I like having little buttons, right? So now I have a little slicer up here. I can click on it and say, I just want to see my USA company. I just want to see my UK company. And if you haven't seen Power BI, everything inside of this is also a slicer. So I can say, I just want to see Peter's sales. And you'll notice that all of my charts adjust to show me just Peter's or Linda's sales, right? So with the concept of this meeting, right, I want to view my reports remotely. So here I have a report, and since I've signed in, you'll notice up at the top right-hand side of Power BI, you can see my name up there. But since I've signed in, I can just simply publish this, and it's going to ask me if I want to save it. We'll say sure. We'll call this TVS sales. Okay. And it's asking me which workspace. All right. Now, to keep this kind of simplified and understanding, there's lots of different workspaces. Basically, you'll have one that you want to kind of keep all of your reports in. All your SharePoints and Teams groups will also show up here, which, maybe not the right spot for your reports. So I'm going to select my business intelligence workspace here and just click select. And Power BI is going about the process of actually publishing this to the web for me. So while that's doing its thing, it finished, successful. Cool. So let's go ahead and open up a web browser here, and I'm just going to go out to app.powerbi.com, sign in with my AD credentials. And I'm going to go out to the shared with me reports. I kind of like pointing people to this because there's a lot of different areas inside of the app space, but if you go to your shared with me, you're kind of limited to just the reports that are shown with you. If you're not a designer, that's where you really need to be anyway. And there we can see there's my TVF Sales 2 report. I can click into this report. And since I already have my on-premises data gateway set up, this report is on the web, but live pulling data from cubes that are on the server that I just built it on, right? Very quick, and it's every time I click a button, it's sending a new query, and you can kind of see how quick it's responding, even though it's on the web. So that's our Power BI, how we can use it, right? Like I mentioned, it's not a robust report, but in the matter of 15 minutes, we've created a report, published it, and I could then start sharing that out to additional users. Right, the sharing process, just to kind of wrap this Power BI demo up, is as simple as adding email addresses to this report. Additionally, if you didn't want to share just an individual report, you can actually share your whole workspace with users as well. So I could say, since I published this to the business intelligence workspace, I could actually share access to that workspace. And then my colleagues would see all of the reports in there. Great. So yeah, so Power BI is very flexible, very quick to use, and like I mentioned, it's kind of an ease of use aspect. There are ways to make it more difficult. I'm not saying it's always easy, but it's if you build it against cubes, it's as easy as that. Building it against data sources where you have to kind of know your table structures and relationships can be a little bit more daunting. Okay, great. So that's Power BI. So let's move into our next solution here that makes it available to run reports remotely, which is Jet Reports. And if you haven't heard of Jet Reports, I definitely recommend you do some Googling about them. It's a great software. It's an Excel add-in that's built directly into Excel, and it makes it so that users that don't know code can create reports directly in Excel. You don't have to know SQL, you don't have to know nav coding, you don't have to know any of that. Jet Reports really got its roots from Dynamics Nav, right? There was a pain point. The only way to get data out of it was to copy and paste it. This was way back in like Nav 3, Nav 2, something like that, right? And so Jet Reports was created to basically be an Excel add-in that helps pull that data out of Nav. Fast forward till now, it's made it so that you can pull data out of Dynamics Nav, Business Central. You can pull it out of pretty much the entire Dynamics stack, so Great Plains and AX, D365. But above and beyond that, you can hook it up to any kind of SQL or ODBC or web services database out there as well. So there's a lot of potential connections on the plate with Jet Reports. One of the neat things about it is that it offers a series of wizards for your users to kind of help report creation early on. There's above and beyond the wizards, you can also create very customized reports using what they call NL and basically Jet functions, right? Through the use of either the customized Jet functions or these wizards, though, we can create these reports that are directly in Excel that a user could then just refresh if they had the Jet add-in installed, or they could refresh from a Jet hub, right? Which is what we're going to be showcasing today. We'll create a quick little report, publish it up to the Jet hub, show you kind of what that Jet hub looks like, and basically make it so that we can pull that data down. While it does have a short learning curve to creating the functions, it is written in a new language, if you will, Jet functions. Right? They're similar to an Excel function in the context, but they are their own thing, right? So it does require some learning on that front. It also requires a little bit of an understanding of the database that you're connecting to. One of the common things that I hear from clients when I'm working with them is, well, how did you know that that was the table to go to? And the answer is, well, I researched it before, and so it was stuck in the recesses of my mind somewhere, right? There isn't a pointer that says, oh, well, you need this dimensions description, you have to go to this other table, right? You can use naming conventions to get there, but it does still require some database understanding. And the only con other than that is that the designer licenses are restricted, as opposed to, say, a Power BI or a SSRS, where pretty much anyone can start designing those reports. With Jet, it does kind of limit it. Now, some could say that that's a pro as well, because I don't want all of my users to be designing reports, right? So in that case, you can maybe move that over into the pro column as well. But I do like to mention it. So like I mentioned, with the concept of this session, right, I need to run my reports remotely. With Jet, the option that's presented for this is through the Jet Hub, okay? Now, you could also use remote apps, right? If you've used like Microsoft remote apps, and that's basically just running Excel as if you were on the other server anyway. So you'd still have to connect into a VPN. So there is yet another option. But kind of keeping the focus on getting my reports out of a web browser, this is where we would go with Jet Hub. Okay, this can be hosted internally. Well, it is typically hosted internally, I suppose, unless you hosted it inside of like an Azure or something. But it can be exposed to external users very securely, right? So what I mean by that is, more typically what people will do is set it up for intranet, right? If I'm inside of the domain, or if I have my VPN connected, I can go out to reports.somecompany.com and it's going to pull up into my Jet Hub. Okay, if I wanted to make that externally available, all I have to do is create a DNS for it, kind of like I mentioned, the reports.somecompany.com, and assign an SSL certificate to it, so that all of my data going through that connection would be encrypted. Super easy to do, just extra steps if you wanted to make that externally available. Otherwise, the out of the box creates an internal Jet Hub for your users. One of the neat things about the hub is that your users, once you've set them up and kind of cut them loose, they can create their own report schedules. So if they find reports that are helpful to them, if they need to see this on a regular cadence, they can actually schedule those reports by themselves, and they don't need to ask you to do so. Once you've trained your users to do that, it can become very powerful in that case. So, Jet Reports, let's go take a quick peek at that. If you've never seen Jet Reports, today's your day. So I'm going to go ahead and just open this up. You'll notice that even though I'm opening up the Jet Reports logo, it's actually opening up inside of Excel here. Great. And there's my Jet ribbon. It's right up here at the top. I am using the latest version of all of these softwares today, so if yours looks different, that's why. I definitely recommend staying updated. They are always patching and making things nicer. So with that being said, let's create a quick little report here. Again, using databases from Jet Analytics to kind of keep this streamlined. So here I have I'm just going to create a report wizard, right? I'm going to use one of those wizards that I mentioned earlier to just kind of create something nice and quick. So here I have my data warehouse, and I'm just going to say I want to look at my sales posted transactions. I want to pull some sales data. Okay, we're going to click next. And in this next screen, let's just make this full screen. And this next screen is basically just asking me what fields I want to see. So I just want to see my salesperson, my location, and my sell to customer. Oh, there it is. And then quantity and sales, right? A couple of different levels of detail, and then some measures to sum up. Okay. Oh, that's why I can't see the next button if I go full screen. Let's see if I can just make this bigger. Cool. Right. And this next screen, it's asking me if I wanted to add a filter, and I do. I want to go ahead and say allow my users to run a filter on the posting date. In this case, I'm going to say I want to set it to November of 2019. I'm working off of a demo database, so I have an idea of what data is in there. Okay, and you'll notice I can give this as a report option so that my users can run this when they're running the report. I can add as many filters as makes sense to do. In this case, this is all I need. For grouping, so if you wanted your report to kind of be grouped up, this is a nice, easy way to simplify that. So I'm going to group it by location, and then I'm going to group it by my salesperson, right? And what that means is I'm going to see a group for all my locations, and then within each location, I'll see all of the salespersons that belong there. And since the salesperson is also a grouping, I'll then see all of the customers that belong to each of those salespersons below that. Great. The sort, I don't necessarily need a sort. If I wanted to say sort it by location, I could, right? Just to make sure that it's always going to be sorted that way, but doesn't necessarily need to be. For this totaling, I'm just going to say, yep, go ahead and total up both of the measures that you found there. And then this last step is just kind of adding some kind of prettying features to Excel to kind of make it look more like a report, as well as adding the grouping feature through Excel. Great. And this last screen is just saying, here's what you've asked, right? This is going to create a report with this filter, with these fields. These are groupings. Here's a sort. This is the totaling, right? You'll notice sales to customer here doesn't have a sort or a group. That's because that's going to be my kind of my detail line level, if you will. Cool. And I can go back and change anything if I wanted to, but otherwise I'm just going to click finish. And the Jet add-in is going to create all of these different pieces for me inside of this report, right? Now, while it doesn't look like a whole bunch, and maybe I don't know what salesperson PS is, so I need to come in here and change something. We're going to say salesperson, and this is where I can use some of my Jet functions. So I'm going to just come out here and say, I just want to find the first from my salesperson. I think it's salesperson purchaser. Yep. And I just want to find the first name where the code is equal to this cell. I'm going to lock it to that column so that as my rows generate, that keeps going there. Perfect. So there's my salesperson. And one other thing I want to add to this is my customer name. So we'll come out here. Again, do the same kind of thing. Perfect. You'll notice I put some fit commands. That's just telling Jet to make sure that that command, the cell fits there. And then lastly, just kind of some data formatting here. So I just want to make sure that these, let's say I want to make sure that this is $1 and that this has commas in it. Cool. Make this look like a bold header and hide my grid lines. And now within, what, 7 minutes, I've created a pretty powerful little report here that when I run this, my users can have a date range. And, you know, albeit I'm just kind of using some sales examples. This could be whatever. This could be commissions reporting, right? This could be any kind of standard like quantity, you know, restock reporting that you need. And so here we have it. By location, I can see all of the quantity and all of the sales sold there. If I expand that out, I can see my salesperson code, and I put the name at the top level, so I'd have to carry that down. But once I expand out Bart, we can see here's Bart. We can see the customer, and we can see a sum of all of these lines, right? So since I didn't group it by customer, what it's really trying to tell me here is that there's lines for each of these, right? So maybe I need to make this a grouping layer. But beyond that, we have a report that has been created, right? Maybe I wanted to see that line level, okay? So from here, all I need to do is save this. So I'm going to save this as just in my documents folder here. Cool. And to publish this, just like in Power BI, how it's just kind of like a one-click option, the same thing is true with Jet. So up in here in my ribbon, you see this upload button. I can click upload. It's going to ask me a couple of quick questions like where do I, what's my main data source? In this case, it's correct. Do I want to put it into a folder so I can have like a sales folder, a finance folder, warehousing folder, whatever. And I can add descriptions to this as well, right? Now, descriptions aren't necessarily needed. I kind of like using version. So you can say, updated salesperson name or whatever, right? It gives you an ability to add something there if you wanted to. Once I click upload, it's going to ask for some permissions just to make sure that, hey, do you have permissions to use this data source? So again, keeping everything nice and authenticated there. I'll authenticate with my AD credentials. Cool. And now the report's being uploaded, okay? I can then use the button that they've added to this hub or to the Jet hub sorry, I can use the button that they've added to Jet Reports to open the Jet Hub, and it'll open it up directly to the site that I have set up internally. Okay, so this website, although I've got it set up as an intranet connection, this could very easily be set up to be externally available, right? Since this is a demo, I don't necessarily need users to log into it, but all I'd need is a DNS and an SSL, and this is exposed to, say, your cell phone. Beyond that, the user could come in here, log into the Jet Hub, and once you've logged in, the users are only going to be able to see the reports that have been shared with them. Okay, similar to in Power BI, how you're only going to see reports or workspaces that have been shared with you. Same thing happens with the Jet Hub. As an administrator, administrators can see all reports by just changing the little drop down there. But here we have this TVF sales Jet report that we created. I can run it from directly in the hub and still have my options. So maybe I wanted to change this to be like, I don't know, 11:15 for some reason, right? And I can then say run report. It's going to actually run it directly in the hub for me. And assuming that I was remotely accessing this is how I'd want to do it, right? If I'm not on a VPN, I'm not on site, I can use the hub to run the report and get me that detail level. And then when I try to open the report, it's going to offer whether I want to download the report or open it in Excel online, right? So if I didn't even have Excel installed on my remote machine, I could even just say open this thing in Excel online. Maybe here, we'll just open it in Excel. It does open it up in just an Excel online. It does lose all of its kind of functions there. You would never be able to refresh that report from that point forward. But here we go. I just downloaded it and opened it, and you can see, yep, it's the same report. I can still expand all of these data points and see all of the detail that is within it. Great. So here, that's how we can use Jet Reports to run some reports and consume some data remotely. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of close this down, close down my Jet Hub, and close down my report. Perfect. All right, so again, another fast, efficient way of sharing those reports with your users. Not all reports are going to be that fast to create, right? But definitely makes it easy for your users to consume. And so lastly, the last option that we have that I'm going to kind of demo here today is SSRS. And I won't go into as much details with SSRS because it does require a little bit more skill set on hand to really be able to leverage. If you don't have those skill sets on hand, definitely reach out to the Tigunia team. We have lots of experts that know SSRS and SQL like it's the back of our hands. So feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to help there. But you know, just like the other ones, there's some pros and cons with reporting services. Pros is that it's very flexible in the data modeling, right? It's built directly on the SQL stack, so we can do pretty much anything that we can do with SQL. Pivoting data, all kinds of common table expressions, right? All of that stuff is at your command within reporting services. Another pro is that it's hosted internally, right? We don't have to publish our reports to some other site. It's all hosted internally. It does support scheduling and batch scheduling, just like Jet Reports does. So we can schedule a report to run out for everybody, or we can have a report sent differently for different people, right? Each of our salespeople gets their own sales report, for instance. And it's included in all SQL non-express licenses, right? So if you actually have a SQL license, right, can't be SQL Express, the free version, but all SQL versions include SQL Server reporting services. Whether or not you've installed it, now that's a different thing, but it's part of having a SQL Server license, right? And a lot of people don't necessarily know that. So if you already have SQL installed somewhere, you already have reporting services. No extra costs associated other than resources. So some of the cons though. The biggest con is that it requires some intricate knowledge of not only SQL, but also of Visual Studio, which is where we're going to be building this report. So SQL knowledge on top of having some Visual Studio knowledge, right? It's a much steeper learning curve than say a Power BI or a Jet Reports. Again, just like Jet, it does require the understanding of the database. And to be honest, so does Power BI if you started getting into data modeling. The bigger con with SSRS is that it is a slower development cycle, right? I can't create like a wizard report like I did with Jet inside of SSRS, right? Partially because it has such a flexible data modeling system, right? So pros and cons, right? And I guess the last con there, bad code can lead to very slow reports. That's true with almost any front end tool, but reporting services kind of more so because it does require such a good intricate knowledge of how things tie together, right? But if you haven't seen reporting services, or perhaps you've seen reporting services before it got a facelift, it's really come a long ways and is a very solid reporting solution for companies, right? It's set up internally. It uses your entire Windows authentication. So everybody that's set up is basically there. You just use your SQL authentication for that. You can use Active Directory authentication, right? Everything's nice and secured that way. The actual website that we publish this report to, much like the Jet Hub, can be secured with a SSL and DNS, right? So that way your users could access this remotely. And one of the kind of neat things here is that we can embed these SSRS reports directly into SharePoint sites, right? With Power BI, we can actually embed them into SharePoint as well as like Business Central and D365, and there's even some more. So I imagine that we'll probably see more of that with SSRS going forward. But for now, we can embed it into SharePoint sites, which is pretty commonplace for a lot of users as well. So like I mentioned, let's go take a quick peek at what that looks like. And since reporting services can be a lot more involved than some of these others, I've already kind of teed up a report for us to just peek at here. Okay, so I've opened up, this is Visual Studio, and this is with reporting services add-in or extension kind of keyed up, right? So that we can do some report projects. And if you've never seen this, then it's probably just way too much information. At the end of the day, it's all driven by our data sets over here on the left-hand side is what's included in our report, okay? If I was to take a quick peek at this SQL query, we can see what it's actually doing here. It's running over to a table and selecting from our sales posted transactions, again, from a Jet Analytics data warehouse database, okay? So data's already been kind of cleaned up. If you have something similar to a data warehouse, you could do that. You can even write this directly against your ERP or CRM database, right? SSRS is very flexible in that sense. So I've got some SQL query going on here. I'm joining off to my salesperson table to pull back the salesperson name. I'm joining off to the customer table to pull back the customer's name, right? We've got a filter down in here that's basically going to be allowing my users to be selecting those parameters, right? In fact, I think I just left that off for the time being. But what I'm pointing out here is that it does require some SQL. Albeit this is a pretty straightforward and simple SQL query. So, you know, it doesn't, most SSRS reports are going to have a little bit more meat on the bone, if you will, or a lot more heavy lifting type of logic that needs to be accomplished. But for this example, right, it accomplishes the purpose. We've got a SQL query in the background there. And effectively, if I wanted to add anything to that, I would have to modify this data set. Right, so I could take this, open it up into Excel. Since I've showed you how we can modify all of these other reports with Power BI and Jet, I wanted to at least kind of show you what's involved with an SSRS change, right? So once SQL opens up here, we'll go ahead and add the location element to our query here and just kind of bring that all the way through the report, publish it, and then we'll be all said and done. Although now I'm looking at time, I don't know if I actually have time for that. Kelly, do I have a bunch of questions or do I have time to kind of keep going with this?
No, you can definitely elaborate a little bit more if you'd like.
Great, thanks. So here we are. I'm opening up, I've got SQL Server open now, and I now have my query here, and I can just paste in this query. Okay, and I could even run this, right? If I run this, it returns some data. Yay! All right, so let's add to this though. So to add to this, again, requires that you know some SQL. So I'm going to come out here and I'm going to say I want to grab an additional field from my sales posted transactions table, which I've aliased with an S. So I just say go to the S table, find that location code field, and pull that back, right? But if I run this again, the location code, it needs to be grouped by. But the location code itself might not tell me what I want to see, right? In this case, it's kind of, the description's almost kind of built into it, but maybe I wanted to pull in that extra logic, right? So to pull in an actual name, I'd have to come out here, do a left join onto my location table, say on the location code is equal to the location code, right? And so now I've kind of created this extra piece to my query. I can then pull that field in. Give it a little name, right? And group it. Great. So now, I've adjusted the query, right? And we can see this extra data point now. We have this extra location code in here. So I can then take this query, go back into Visual Studio, paste this guy in there so that I now have my extra location code piece in there. And when I click OK, Visual Studio kind of reads the query updates, and you can see now here's this the location code and location name. Now, depending on how I wanted to integrate this is where the next step comes into play. If I wanted to just kind of show that location as part of my customer, I could drag it in here and just show it there. If I wanted to group it by locations, I could actually drag it down here and drop it as a row group. And you'll notice it kind of adds it as yet another grouping here. And I want to make it so that there is a row outside my salesperson with my locations. Okay. And then to simplify this visually, I'm just going to make it so that this row and cell has a color of gray. Okay. So now when I preview this, what we're going to see is that additional data point level of the location name being in here, right? There's our Amsterdam warehouse. It's then split out by salesperson after that, and then each of their customers is included under that. I could have it so that this isn't automatically collapsed if I wanted to, but sometimes it helps to kind of streamline that, right? So SSRS is extremely flexible. As you can see, I have a lot of control over where stuff goes, how it exists. And then lastly, I'm just going to save this, and we're going to go out to our SSRS website. Okay. And just like all the other front ends, we can have folders for all of our reports. I'm going to click into my sales area, and I'm going to just click upload, and I'm going to find where I saved this. Save as. Perfect. Yeah, glad I did it that way. I would not have found that. So we're going to go open up this spot. There's my RDL, right? So it's noticing that, hey, you're trying to upload an RDL, which is kind of like the SSRS file, if you will. You're trying to upload an RDL that already exists with this name. Do you want to overwrite it, or do you want to cancel it and try uploading it with a different name? In this case, I do want to just overwrite it. Okay, so it's going to do its thing. And once that finishes up, shouldn't take too much longer here, we'll have our report out there in a web page. Perfect, there it goes. And I can just open this report. And this is now in a, I'm in a browser. Again, it's internal, but with an SSL and a DNS, this could be very easily made externally available. There's the upload finally completed. We can see now my report's actually going to open, and there's the location that we've just added, right? Again, reports here can be shared with users, and as soon as you share a report with the user, then they'll see those folders. But otherwise, everything else is set up and available here. So that's my spiel on the three different types, right? So we've looked at the Power BI, Jet Reports, and SSRS. Kind of showed how we can not only create a report but also get it published up into the web in whatever capacity, and then consume those reports down again. So hopefully that's been an informative session for you. And Kelly, I'll open it up for questions if we have any right now.
It doesn't look like we had any questions. I know that you covered quite a bit of information during that presentation. You always do a really good job of kind of going into some of those details that a lot of people have common questions about. So I want to visit with you, since we don't have any questions in the chat. Are there any kind of frequently asked questions, or other common instances that people would probably experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one of the most common things that comes up with reports is, why is my report running slow, right? And what it really comes down to is either A, it's a bad design, which, sorry, I've built bad designs too, but sometimes that's the root of the issue, is sometimes it's a bad report design.
Sure.
Or the other option is that you're trying to just consume just an immense amount of data. In some instances where I've seen that, let's say they're accruing 1 million transactional lines per month, right? That's a lot of data for some of these reports to really churn through. If that's the scenario, if that's the scenario, I would suggest either A, data warehouse and CubeSat, or B, going with SSRS style reporting, maybe in Power BI as paginated reports, but the reason being is you have a lot more control over how the queries are written. So if speed is of the essence, SQL is where it's at. Other things, definitely, like I mentioned at the beginning here, I've really only covered 3 front-end tools, right? And there's a bunch of them. There are just new front-end tools out there every day, and a lot of them have very similar aspects. It's usually able to publish a report, or at least share it with people. Albeit some of them don't offer for externally accessible reports. Some of them you can't publish to the web per se, but the concepts covered here apply to at least 3 or 4 other front-end tools that I can think of. So it's hopefully been informative in that respect. Can't think of anything other than like high level questions that come up commonly. But
okay, well, we could probably go ahead and wrap up here. I do want to remind everyone that Ryan does have another session going over time extender and its access for Business Central data here in about another half hour to 40 minutes. So we'd love for you all to join us for that one as well. But we do want to thank you for attending this session. Again, we hope the information provided here today was beneficial to you and your team. If you would like to connect with our presenter, Ryan, or to learn more about all of Tigunia services, please reach out to us at connect@tigunia.com. You can reach out to Ryan directly. Ryan, do you want to go ahead and give them your email address?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can reach out to me at Ryan, RYAN, @Tigunia.com. And yeah, thanks, Kelly, for kind of reminding me that I do have that other session coming up here in the next half hour. And throughout this session, everybody, I've referred to Gen Analytics cubes and data warehouses a number of times. So if that sounded foreign to you, definitely check that next session out, in which I'll be kind of showcasing the Jet Analytics tool, and we'll actually be creating a cube from scratch. So you'll be able to see kind of all of what's involved and how easy that can be as well. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Well, again, thanks everyone for joining us. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And again, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer any questions or dive a little bit deeper for anything that you hear today.
Thanks, everybody.